This is the Lincoln Journal-Star editorial board, and we are interviewing Senator Mike Flood, who is running for Congress in the 1st District, the Republican nomination in the May primary. Senator, thank you very much for joining us. I know you've got a lot going on right now. I appreciate you taking some time away from a few minutes on the floor. Maybe this will be the most fun you have all day, or maybe not.
I'm hoping.
But we'll start off by introducing our other 2 editorial board members on here. I'll keep an eye out for anybody else from the board that shows up. But Robin, you want to introduce yourself first?
I'm Robin Eschliman of Eschliman Commercial Real Estate and the Grow Lincoln Show, and I'm a volunteer on the editorial board.
Nice to see you again, Robin.
And Kent?
And I'm Kent Walgamat. I write about arts and entertainment, and I've been on the editorial board for 12 years.
Oh my!
And Kent
proving I'm old.
Kent gets paid to do it. Robin has done this for a few years, just out of the goodness of her heart or a fear of what we might do without her. So, Senator, we'll start off with kind of an open-ended question. We'll finish with an open-ended question too. So you'll kind of have a closing statement, if you will. But for starters, Washington doesn't look to be that much of a fun place to be these days. Yet you want to go there to represent us. Why do you want to be in Congress, and what experiences and attributes qualify you for it?
Well, thanks, Dave, and thank you to everybody on the line today for this opportunity to visit with you and to work toward earning the endorsement of your editorial board. You know, I really didn't start looking at this race until maybe the end of last year. As you know, Congressman Fortenberry had been charged in a federal court in the state of California, and I thought it was important that the 1st Congressional District continue to have a conservative candidate to consider in the primary. And as we marched into January, I really felt like this was an opportunity to present another option, but also bring new and fresh energy to the race. I had supported Congressman Fortenberry for years. He was our congressman. My background, I'm from Norfolk, born and raised, got in the radio business when I was 15 years old, and went to college, and in the first year of law school, had the opportunity to start a radio station. Went out and found 3 people to be investors, and went out and started US 92 radio when I was 24 and started making a payroll. And I've made a payroll every 2 weeks since the year 2000, May of 2000. And today I have 22 TV and radio stations across the state. I started in public service when Gene Tyson decided to retire from the legislature. I put my name in, and my community sent me to Lincoln beginning in 2005. And I served for 8 years. From 2005 to 2012, 6 of them as speaker. And I love the legislative environment. It's an environment that I think I have a skill set for. I thrive in. I enjoy the people and the personalities and the ideas. And I truly believe that a good legislature is the marketplace of ideas. It's where, in our case, Nebraska comes to share its thoughts and hopes and aspirations and problem-solving efforts to confront the big issues in our state. And I really have always enjoyed it. I ran again in 2020. I'm in my 2nd year now in the legislature again. And the opportunity to serve in Congress is an honor. It is America's marketplace of ideas. And, you know, I enjoy bringing people together to find solutions. I enjoy the process of thinking through the different narratives and the different stories and the different potential solutions that we can find to big problems. And the opportunity to do that at the federal level for my home district, representing the city of Lincoln, would be an honor. I think we have a district with a lot of variety. We have, of course, Lincoln. It's home to the flagship university system, the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And then we have all of these rural areas from Seward to Norfolk, Columbus to Fremont, Cass County, even Southern Sarpy. I have the energy for it, and I think I can do a good job connecting with people. And that's what I hear. Since I've been out on the streets, a lot of people have said to me, I like the idea of just connecting and talking to people and having fresh ideas. And I've been really kind of blessed by having that feedback, because it encourages me to get out there and even work harder.
All right. Well, you alluded to this a little bit, and maybe you can elaborate on it in the second question. But um, how do we're a divided nation. It's a divided Congress. How do you help it? How do you make it better at the same time that you're representing Nebraska?
When I came into the Nebraska legislature in 2005, it was at the sunset of term limits, I should say the sunset of traditional legislative operations and the dawn of term limits. And I walked into a legislature with a lot of very experienced members across the state. And I got there and listened and learned and spent time with my colleagues. It didn't matter what party they were. It didn't matter whether they were urban or rural, male or female. I sat in people's living rooms in Lincoln and listened as they talked about what made the legislature a unique place to serve. And 2 years later, they elected me to be their speaker. And, I treat everyone with respect, regardless of your party, regardless of, whatever issues that you're passionate about. I just haven't gotten anywhere by treating people with anything less than a full amount of respect. And I find that I can find common ground with almost anyone. And I think that is the mark of a good legislator, somebody that listens long enough to find a shared interest that somebody has, to see if you can put a solution together. And there are far more solutions than there are problems if you're willing to listen. And so, yeah, I understand that our country is divided, and there are going to be issues that are so difficult that, people maybe don't want to listen to the other side, or there's going to be no negotiation. I get that. And you know what? It was that way 20 years ago when I started in public service. But at the end of the day, if you're about finding solutions, you're about respecting other people, I think, you can be an effective legislator. The other thing I'd add real quick is that, and people talk about this all the time, but if you think about what our founding fathers envisioned, the most powerful branch of government is supposed to be the legislative branch. It was envisioned in the Federalist Papers as the place where, people, especially in the House of Representatives, had the closest thing possible to direct democracy. Elected every 2 years, somewhat raucous, the voice of the people. The executive branch was to carry it out, and the Supreme Court was there to settle disputes. As I look at Washington, sometimes the most powerful branch of government is the Supreme Court, where they're ending up deciding the issues that should be solved in the legislative branch. And if you want to be part of the change, you have to be willing to sign up, put your name on the ballot, and go down there and become a reasonable person that can find solutions. And that's why I'm doing it.
All right. Speaking of needing solutions, where do you think we need to go as a nation in terms of ag policy? What needs to happen to help Nebraskans, to help the Midwest, help farmers and ranchers?
Well, the first thing that I hear about when I'm in the 1st Congressional District is just supporting the crop insurance program. People that get into farming, obviously they're business people that assume a pretty significant risk. You can get into a fast food restaurant or a radio station or a lot of other businesses with a lot less capital. The men and women in agriculture, they make a significant investment and, obviously oftentimes secured by their real estate. And on top of that, they have unbelievable risk. One of the best things the federal government does, I think, is for ag policy is provides crop insurance. And that program is something that farmers and ranchers, especially anybody in row crop, they want to talk a lot about where that program's going. And so I've heard a lot about that. The other thing is being able to transfer the family farm to the next generation. Having been a small town attorney and done my fair share of estate and probate work, I know how important the step up in basis is, allowing farm families to pass the farm generation to generation to generation. The idea of federal income tax on, a cash poor, land rich family, which we have a lot of in this state because we have a lot of land, is very important. And so, those are the two things that I hear the most in ag policy when I'm out driving around. But more than anything, when I talk to farm groups, and I'm pleased to tell you, I got the endorsement of Farm Bureau, which is an accomplishment because they make you work really hard for that. They want you to listen. They don't expect you to be an expert in every ag policy, but they want to know that when they have a question, they can pick up the phone, or when they're visiting in Washington, they have FaceTime with a congressman, or if you're driving around the district. And more than anything, that's what I hear about. But I understand what an important industry agriculture is. And I live in Norfolk. I live in a town where our fortunes ebb and flow with what corn prices are doing or soybean prices. And I'm feeling the effect right now of a soybean crush plant coming to our area and watching different industries want to build it, and the construction and all of those things. And so I feel like I'm very connected to the ag economy.
All right. Thank you, Senator. So next question. Despite the fact that our gubernatorial candidates are spending a lot of time talking about immigration policy, immigration is a federal issue, and it's one that Congress hasn't really been able to crack. What elements do you think belong in immigration reform changes?
Well, everybody says it. Even President Biden said it in the State of the Union earlier this year. We have to get control of the border. We have to know who's crossing the border. We have to, for national security reasons, control access. And so you start there. But more than anything, people want an immigration system that works. We have a workforce issue in this state. It isn't that people don't want the additional workforce. They want them here legally, which means we have to have a system that functions, that processes applications, that looks at all of the security interests of the United States, and ensures public safety. Those are basic tenets of our immigration system. We don't have enough people talking about how do you make the system work, because we clearly know that we have a need for more workers. So I think for me, it starts with border security. It trails into figuring out how we take the next step by processing applications. If the system takes 10 years, well, nobody should be surprised that it's not working, because it's clearly not. So, at the end of the day, that's where I am on the immigration issue. People will ask me all the time, because it has been a race in my issue. When Congressman Fortenberry was still in the race, he made a lot about a vote I took 10 years ago. And I think it's important I explain that vote. In 2012, and it had been an issue for maybe 2 years. The issue was, do we provide prenatal care to low-income women in the state of Nebraska? And it was the intersection of two very big issues, immigration and pro-life. I consider myself a very pro-life senator. I passed the first ban on abortions at 20 weeks in the nation, the same law that Mississippi had a derivative of when it passed it, and is now under consideration of the U.S. Supreme Court. And at that time, there were a lot of voices in my party that said, no, we shouldn't do that. That's assisting in immigration. And I said, the sanctity of life is very important to me. I am going to vote on my pro-life convictions. And I cast a vote that was politically unpopular back in 2012, such that people are still talking about it 10 years later. But I think it demonstrates that I'm willing to do the right thing, even when it's difficult. From where I sit, it doesn't mean somebody can't have a different opinion, but that I really do believe in the pro-life cause, and I really do believe in the sanctity of life, not just when it's easy, but when it's hard. And that's why you've seen so many commercials about my vote. And at the end of the day, my vote 10 years ago was about providing low-income women prenatal services, because the child they're about to have not only will be a Nebraskan, an American, still a child. It's an unborn child and deserves our protection.
All right. Well, thank you. Senator, the next question for you. We've talked about a number of issues that we have been interested in, but if you're serving in Congress, what are you most interested in? What are your top priorities?
Well, I want to talk about two specifically that I don't think have really been on anybody's radar. If you look at our economy, and where the wealth is being generated, it's by companies that look at the supply chain and they figure out ways to use technology to eliminate positions in the supply chain. Now, on a very simple level, think of Uber. There used to be dispatchers and taxi cab drivers, and they eliminated the dispatchers and the taxi cab drivers, and they linked people who wanted to ride up with people who were driving by in a car, and they've made a lot of money with an app called Uber. I call that disintermediation. And when you look at the economy, just take my county, Madison County, not unlike almost every other county in Nebraska. We have a lot of low skill, low wage jobs. We have 1,200 people working at a pork plant in Madison. And I am confident that in the next 8 years, by 2030, and I'm backed up by a McKinsey study that basically says, by 2030, you're going to see a massive reduction in the number of those jobs that are low skill, low wage, because we will use technology to bring the pigs in, slaughter the pigs, harvest the meat, get rid of the hide, process the meat, and get it to the consumer. And maybe instead of 1,200 workers at that pork plant, we have 400, but they'll be better educated. They'll be expected to run the machines and the software. And so we have to take this workforce we have now, and we need to transition the workforce to be ready for the age of automation. We have to make sure that we're teaching kids how to code in our schools, that we're walking into communities that have a lot of English language learners, and that we're inspiring them to embrace technology and to find jobs in the technical fields, to be able to work in the plants and the places of employment that will require that higher level of skill, and they'll hopefully make more money. But right now, as I look around, we are sitting ducks for the age of automation. Nobody needs to think very, very hard about it. Go to Walmart and tell me how many checkers were there 10 years ago and how many checkers are there today. For businesses to grow, they have to figure out how to use technology to reduce their overhead, which means we have to inspire the next generation of our workforce to be engaged in the technical fields and to learn how to navigate, information technology. So that's one thing, and I think that is very important. The second is that economic development has changed. And this is really where Lincoln has provided a lot of leadership. And I'm talking about the business community in Lincoln. I remember back in 2010, Matt McNair, he reached out to me. He might have been in the Attorney General's office at that time, and he was telling me about these entrepreneurship contests, and that Invest Nebraska was just coming on the scene and had been around under Governor Johans. And I remember thinking, gosh, entrepreneurship, I don't know. And then back in 2015, 2016, I was asked to join the board of directors for Invest Nebraska. And I got on, and I really didn't know what it was. And then I started to see mostly companies that had university students involved that have this idea to use technology to solve a problem. And the Invest Nebraska would make $50,000, $100,000 in seed funding available to them. And all of a sudden they were creating these businesses, understanding that 7 or 8 of them would fail, but 1 to 3 of them would not. And they would be buying us out for, $2 million down the road 3 years. And they'd be hiring 75, 80 people. And as a member of the Invest Nebraska board, I watched what really has developed in the Haymarket and Lincoln grow into job growth and opportunities in technology in Nebraska. And I think that's fascinating. And I want to continue to be very connected to that community. I want to see that kind of job growth in every community. I want to take the magic of Invest Nebraska and get chambers of commerce and school boards and cities thinking about taking these smart kids, sometimes come off the farm, and making sure they have access to capital, at-risk capital, which our banks aren't, in Nebraska, when we make a loan, it's usually secured by the real estate. It's not like banks are super familiar with making money available to people with ideas like that, and making sure that we create an environment where these smart farm kids have access to the right kind of money to make a difference. And I'll end with this. If you think about what our greatest resource is, it's the fact that, and it's not all just farm kids, it's everybody. But I know a family in Tilden, on a Sunday afternoon during harvest, and they have a problem. They don't always have an implement to run to within 20 minutes and get a part. They fashion something up in the machine shed, and they keep going with harvest, and they solve problems. And taking that just skill of perseverance and grit and tenacity and resilience and turning it into, let's solve problems using technology. That's where I think we grow Nebraska. And I'm very excited about that. And that's really something Lincoln should take credit for, because it started here.
All right. Well, I have a last question, but it has to be the last question. So this is where Kent and Robin can jump in if they've got something. And Kent, I can tell from your body language.
Get close to the camera language. As you know, in legislatures, the work really gets done in committee. What committees? Have you given any thought to what committees you'd want to try to get on if you were elected?
Yeah. So when I started the legislature back in 2005, I was on the Judiciary Committee and the Banking Committee. And when I came back, and then I was Speaker, and I wasn't really on substantive committees overall, just running the agenda. And when I came back, I started back on the Banking Committee and the Revenue Committee. And you were right. The best legislation is crafted in committee with the input of industry experts and the input of the general public. I am interested in a variety of committees. Obviously, agriculture is a good fit because of where we are and how important it is as an industry. Last year, my priority bill was making Nebraska the second state in the nation to have a cryptocurrency act that allows banks to take custody of digital assets. I'd be interested in financial services. The military is an especially important industry and mission that we have at Offutt Air Force Base. The House Armed Services Committee is interesting. I know I'm listing a lot of them, but I'm really kind of rattling off a list of priorities. Obviously, renewables and Energy Commerce Committee. Congressman Lee Terry served there for a while, and I worked with him on a lot of issues. But those are the four on my radar. But the minute I say it, I want to follow it up with, when you're a freshman in the United States Congress, you don't really get to pick. I didn't get a pick when I was in the legislature coming in. I was assigned. And so to be a good teammate, obviously, I'm going to work hard at whatever I'm assigned at. And sometimes, to be honest, the last committee I wanted to serve on when I came back to the legislature was the Banking Committee, because I'd been there for 2 years, and it can be a little dry. But I got inspired to do the Digital Financial Innovation Act and have really enjoyed being back. So I'm open-minded when it comes to that.
Notice I said try to get on.
Right.
I want to come back for a minute about the sort of the extreme polarization in the Congress and in Washington in general. Do you think there's anything individual Congress member can do to sort of pull that down a little bit, not demonize the other side and all of that? Because see, that's the reflection that we get out here is, Republicans hate Joe Biden, Democrats hated Donald Trump, right? And that's all there was.
One of the benefits of being a Main Street business person, and anybody watching this that has done business in any Nebraska community knows that when you're trying to run a business and take care of your customers and delight your viewers, your listeners, or whatever it may be, in my case, you have to conduct yourself in such a way that people will listen to what you're trying to tell them. I am a Republican. It's a partisan system. I signed up because I obviously am part of a party and want their nomination and want to represent them in the United States Congress. But I want to do it in a way that, my grandmother, had she still been alive, would still be proud of me. And that starts with treating people with respect, making my point, and doing it in a way that I'm effective and I inspire others to follow me. everybody has their own personal style. My personal style, I really work, you know, I like to say I'm a workhorse, not a show horse. I'm not somebody that holds a press conference every day or runs into the public square screaming and yelling. I do my best work in the legislature, in the committee, making relationships with my colleagues, both Republicans and Democrats. And instead of threatening people, inspiring people to follow where I'm trying to go and being open to their ideas. And so I can't predict every situation. Congress is obviously different than the Nebraska legislature. But one of the benefits to having been the state senator from Madison County for so many years is that, my kindergarten, third and fifth grade teachers are still they're in my orbit, and they'd be the first to call me out if I was behaving in a way that was less than respectful. And, I think that's a benefit of being from Nebraska. So I think that's something that I'll be able to handle and do a good job with.
Robin, do you have any questions?
I do. For the last two presidential elections, we've had objections to the results, and we've had, one side saying the Russians stole the election, the other side saying the Democrats stole the election. And it appears that this is in the water. What do you plan to do if someone comes to you, let's say a donor or your favorite presidential candidate or your political party, and they say, we have to find the votes? We need you to object. Have you thought through the scenario you might have to go through for that?
Not that specific scenario. Let me react to that, though, a little bit. I think Joe Biden is the president of the United States. I think that our elections in Nebraska were fair. I think that the Secretary of State's office has looked into this, and that we can be confident in the effectiveness and the accuracy of our system. In Nebraska, I would support and have supported the voter ID. I think that showing an ID when you vote it helps bolster confidence in our system. And I reject the idea that the federal government should run elections in Nebraska or provide the framework for elections in Nebraska. I think that's a states' rights issue, and we have to maintain that. But obviously, as a elected official, you have to listen if anybody says there's evidence of some kind of fraud when it comes to something as basic as our electoral system. But I have no reason to doubt the credibility of Nebraska's results. And, I think there are a lot of people in a lot of farms and houses and businesses in the 1st Congressional District that want a congressperson that will stand up and speak for the majority of people. And, I cannot imagine very many scenarios where I wouldn't support what a majority of Americans have said or communicated through the voting system, absent any actual evidence of fraud. So I don't know if that answers your question clear enough, but I believe Joe Biden's the president of the United States. And as a Republican, we have to look to 2024 if you want to change that.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Was that it, Robin?
Yeah.
All right. So last question for you, Senator Flood. And as I said, it's kind of open-ended for you, allowing a closing statement, if you will. What have we not asked you that you wish we had?
Well, if I were a resident of the city of Lincoln or Southeast Nebraska, and I feel like a lot of your readers are obviously Lincoln through and through, which I would want to know what would be the benefit of having Mike Flood be my representative in the United States Congress? And my answer to that is, at my core, I am an entrepreneur. I am somebody that wants to work really hard and loves economic development. I am really driven by wanting to create opportunities for our young people. And I know a lot of times in Lincoln, we get frustrated because your young people graduate from this great school system you have in the city of Lincoln, and then they go on to the university, and then they move to another state. It's the same thing in all these other communities. The young people that are born and raised in Columbus or Fremont, they go to the university system and they don't come back to their homes. And when you are invested in your community, it's really important. And we spend a lot of time pointing fingers at schools and politicians and saying, how come you're not sending our young people back? But really it comes down to, how do we create an environment where we inspire those recent graduates to come back and to live in our rural communities, whether it's Lincoln or Norfolk or Seward. And that for me is all part of the economic development ecosystem. And, you know, a couple of years ago, I wanted to do something about it in my hometown. And I reached out to Wayne State College. We set up a program where students can get a scholarship for 4 years to go to Wayne State. 3 years, they're on the campus in Wayne. And the 4th year, they live in downtown Norfolk in specialized housing. And they work for their senior year for 30 hours a week. And they get credit for that. And my message to the people in my hometown is, that's our chance to make this a fun environment for them. Make Norfolk somewhere they want to live and treat them like the adults that they are, even though they don't have their degree yet. They may be students, but they are the best chance we have at growing our town. And to do that, I have worked to get the scholarships in line from the state of Nebraska. And we have 75 young people that will be in my downtown in 2025. I've worked very hard to push for creative districts, understanding that there is a true advantage to using arts and culture to be able to draw young people in. The National Governors Association has shown that the data proves that the more you invest in public art, the better response you will get from young people in their 20s, and they're more likely to live where you want them to live. We have to focus on projects like Invest Nebraska to take that 1 or 2 builders out of 100 and make sure they have access to at-risk capital. And then we have to use density. You know, it's hard to be 22 in a rural community when there aren't a lot of other people your age. And what are you thinking about at 22? You're thinking, well, am I ever going to find a girlfriend or a boyfriend, or, you know, and we have to put them in dense enough environments so that people growing up at that stage in Lincoln or in Norfolk or in Seward are around other people in their age range. And so they feel like it's a welcome place for them. For me, I want people in the city of Lincoln and in Southeast Nebraska to know that if I'm elected to Congress, when I'm at the table, I'm going to be looking at ways to create opportunities so that your children or your grandchildren feel like someone's working for them to bring opportunities here, so that we can keep our young people in our state and take advantage of our best resource. That's what I want to go to bed at night knowing. Very focused on economic development, and that's what I think I can offer the people of the 1st Congressional District.
All right. Well, that was an appropriately inspiring note to end us on, Senator. Thank you. Wait, Kent, you're not going to do this to me, are you?
No, I'm just going to make one quick comment here. In the entire 12 years I've worked on the editorial board, I believe that you're the first candidate who has voluntarily mentioned the arts and had commendable things to say about them. And as somebody who writes in that area,
well,
I appreciate that.
Well, and I'll tell you, last year, I put an amendment on the budget to commit $1 million to creative districts under the Nebraska Cultural or the Nebraska Arts Council. And it was adopted with 25 votes. And today I can tell you there are 17 communities in different, some of them are neighborhoods that are setting up creative districts. And I've led the way on Norfolk's putting together that. Just today on general file, I passed a bill that uses some of our turnback sales tax money, devotes it to creative districts. And in 2023, 2024, there will be $4 to $5 million available for creative districts in the state. The only challenge I have is that Suzanne Wise, who is the director of the Nebraska Arts Council, this is her year, she's retiring, but she's setting up a whole system to do this. And I don't know, to be honest with you, 10 years ago, I probably didn't vote for that kind of funding, but I've been inspired where I've seen it work in other places in the United States. And there's a direct connection between spending in that area and attracting and luring high skill, high wage employees, or I should say workers, into the workforce. And so, whether I'm elected to Congress or not, I think you're going to see a renaissance of this in the next few years. I know there's several neighborhoods in Lincoln, or no, I shouldn't say neighborhoods, areas of the city that are looking at this, just like there are communities like Norfolk and Fremont, and even some small towns. Niobrara is talking about it. So I thank you for that. And I've got a record that stands behind that. And I'm thinking that at the end of the session, you're going to see some movement on that. And look at what's happened in the Haymarket. Look at 12th and P, look at the people that are wanting to live in downtown areas. Like, you're seeing the results of that. And I had Dave Landis come and present in Norfolk. He was a facilitator that was hired by our community. He did a wonderful job of bringing in urban planning and creative districts, but also, the business of that and how it could grow jobs. And I think we're on a good path.
All right. Well, with that, Senator, thank you very much for your time today. We really appreciate your service to the public, and we wish you the best.
Thanks for the opportunity, and look forward to seeing you soon.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.